Asteroid of fear.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Men of the House podcast. And today I have Julian Bermudez, and we're going to talk about he's a psychedelic integration therapist, and I'm super excited about this because yeah, I don't know. I attribute psychedelics with seeking and exploration or seeking of more as it relates to life. So I'm interested to see how this turns out. Excited to know. But how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Yes, awesome. So, all right, let's get into this. Start with the backstory a little bit. Where did you grow up? How did you grow up? Kind of what your parents do? Was it a loving environment? I want to get some context of how we ended up here.
Sure, sure. I'll give you my childhood in a nutshell if that's okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I grew up in Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
My dad was 19, my mom was 21, and they absolutely hated each other. They were never together. It was a one-time deal, and then 9 months later, I came around. So needless to say, since they hated each other, they definitely did not want me. And as I was growing up, they played this game of human hot potato. You take him, no, you take him, and they just bounced me back and forth. And to make matters a little bit more complex, Detroit, Michigan, highly racially motivated, segregated area. My dad's Mexican, Puerto Rican. My mom is German. Both of their
Oh,
parents are immigrants. My mom's mom moved here after the Second World War, and my paternal grandfather moved here from Puerto Rico, and my paternal grandmother moved from Mexico. So, growing up in that area, as I would model one of my parents as children do, the other parent hated me for it, and vice
mm,
versa. And in some ways, they also hated themselves because they were handed these patterns of intergenerational trauma. And the function that I've always had is I've always been a mirror for other people, for them to see themselves. And that was no exception when I was a child. So I would mirror the pain that my parents carried, and they just absolutely hated me for it. And, my mom she got married 3 times in like 12 years and had multiple kids with different people. So she had other kids that she was taking care of. So I was just pushed aside. And since they hated me and there was no space for me, I developed these beliefs about myself that I'm defective, that this is happening because there's something wrong with me, that I'm not worthy of love, I'm not good enough of protection or being cared for. So this created just tremendous pain that I carried around. And, of course, when you're a child and you have no protection, nobody looking out for you, it opens the doors for all sorts of abuse, all sorts of predators to come in. And that's exactly what happened. So from the time that I was about 13 years old, when I was really starting to get on my own, until I was about 22, 23, it was just pure survival. And when I turned about 22 or 23, I had a big wake-up call, and that really sparked me to figure some things out. I knew that I couldn't keep living this way anymore. If I were to continue down this path, I was most likely going to end up dead, or I was going to end up in prison, or some combination of the both. So I started just trying to change my life and clear things out. But for me, when I'm growing up in such a dysfunctional family, what does healthy relationships look like? What do healthy connections look like? What does a healthy lifestyle look like? I'm mistaking all of the pinnacle of those things for the models that I had growing up. So to figure this out was a lot of trial and error. It was a lot of clear out everything in my life, build it up from scratch, and then start over again. I went to university to go and study addiction psychology, clinical psychology, with the idea of transforming all this pain that was inside of me, and of course, helping the people of my community go through the same thing. And through that process, I got to say, I wasn't very thrilled with the responses, the answers I was finding in university. And so I started finding a lot of research, a lot of literature, all in the medical literature, of course. It wasn't that it didn't exist. It wasn't that the research wasn't being done. It was that the university was picking what they wanted us to learn. And I mean, for various reasons, of course, right? And so I found some incredible teachers that were talking about the things that I was very interested in, and I just dedicated myself to that kind of study, independent study, learning from these people myself. The more and more I practiced it on myself, the more I explored the literature over the course of about 7 or 8 years, once things started to really click for me, understanding the things conceptually, reading them in a book, talking to somebody about it, it's totally different than applying those concepts to yourself, to identifying that pain, how the pain from the past keeps showing up to the present, and making choices in how we can navigate that or express it, and ultimately choosing new paths to liberate ourselves from those old ones. Understanding it conceptually is one thing, but then doing it is something completely different. And so once I finally started to figure out after a long haul of how I could start to apply this to my life and things started changing, that's when people came and started seeing me. More and more people wanted to know, well, how can I do that too? And that's how I got where I am.
Bless you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's
Yes.
allergy season in full effect, so I'm gonna probably sneeze a couple times here. Oh, there it is.
Yeah, we get it. We get it in Texas. I had an interesting one a couple of weeks ago where I felt I was driving, Ubering, and I was way out in the country somewhere, and the allergies were robust. But I had this, it was like almost like a tickle in the throat where I'm trying to clear the tickle, but sneezes kept coming. And so I couldn't scratch either itch, unfortunately. Like I didn't get the full orgasmic feel of the sneeze, nor did I get the relief on my throat. And I was like, this is weird. This is the first
Yeah.
time this has ever happened. But between 13 and 22, when when did you become aware that you were mirroring this pain, and how did you come to understand it? Did you experiment like in high school, your younger teenage years? Did you experiment with weed, LSD, anything like that, mushrooms? Because I know for me personally, my psychedelic experiences came much later. And so yeah, when did you become aware, and did you have any experimentation, and did that contribute to that awareness?
Yeah. On some level, I was very aware of it as a child because I would go to my mom's house and my brother, who is 6 years younger than me, would be praised and, valued and respected for some things that he would do. Or my mom would say something, or she had a friend that would do something, and they would all laugh and they would celebrate what had just happened. And so I thought, wow, that's the pinnacle right there. That's the model. You do that and you get valued. And then I would go to my dad's house a week later and I would do that same thing and they would just ridicule, criticize, punish me for what they had just done. So at first, of course, the belief was there's something wrong with me, but also I was realizing very early on that there was nothing that I could do that was going to get me safe or get me valued or accepted or respected by anybody. If no matter what I did, I was going to I was going to get punished for it. So on some level, I was very aware of it. A part of me was, at least. Then there was another part of me. It was a survival adaptation that was saying, well, my environment sucks. My relationships are terrible. There's only two ways I could look at it. The first way is, well, my parents, my caregivers, everybody around me, they're just not up to the job. They're not qualified for this. They're not capable of doing this. In other words, I'm not safe. I'm just screwed. And there's not a lot of flexibility in terms of how to navigate that worldview. So the way that I looked at it, which I think the way that most people look at it, is, well, my parents, my caregivers, they do know what's going on. They're older. They have relationships. They care for other children. They can have connections and safety and they can be valued and respected. The problem is, I'm doing something wrong. I'm not good enough. I'm not worthy. So if I could be good enough, if I could do the things, then I'll get the connections. So there was a balance of the two that were there. On the one hand, I knew I was just screwed. And the other hand, I would try my best to be good enough to get the things. So I was somewhat aware of it, and I started disconnecting from my family very early on, like at age 13. Started going out on my own, living with friends, just bouncing around, staying wherever I could just to get away from the house, the houses. And yeah, when I was in my early 20s, I had a second near-death experience. I had one when I was about 10, and I had another one when I was 22 or 23. And that's what really sparked some things inside of me. I had this incredible, what I would refer to as a psychedelic experience today, is what I would call it. But it was a very much a near-death experience. And it carried on. I started undergoing this transformation. And that was what really sparked the curiosity inside of me. And so when I went to university, it was trying to figure out what was that experience, because that pulled me away from drinking, that pulled me away from the
Mhm.
prescription pills, that pulled me away from so many things that were toxic in my life and encouraged me to change into it really empowered me in a way to make changes in my life. So I wanted to know, what the hell was that experience? I had never heard anybody talk about anything like this. And just kind of mentioning it, you get treated like you're schizophrenic or like you're crazy or
Was it
something.
scary
Oh, it was
or was
terrifying.
it more okay?
It was terrifying on the one hand, but then it was also liberating and empowering. It was
Right,
incredible.
right. That's what I was wondering because oftentimes, like a near-death experience can prompt somebody to actually go out and live,
Hmm.
quote unquote. Um, but yeah, like kind of like you said, I think it's the afterwards that's the liberating part. But kind of when you were describing it, it I wondered because there are some other near-death experiences that you hear of where people have a sense of peace about them,
Hmm.
rather more so than the fear. But
Yeah.
what led to the near-death experience, if you don't mind me asking?
Like what happened?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I was living on my own. I had been living on my own for a decade at that point. So when you move out on your own as a child, you have no resources, you have no support, there's no safety net, nothing. So the stress, the survival mechanisms they're so apparent and powerful all the time. So my health was already never was really healthy. It was never good or balanced. And one of the things I started doing was I started doing martial arts. So I started doing like jujitsu, Muay Thai. I was competing in MMA. And it was a wonderful way for me to channel all this energy, all these emotions that I had, and to express myself and to mellow out, so to speak. But one of the things that happens in the gyms is infections go around on like the wrestling mats and things like that. So, I have bad asthma and really bad eczema all over my body. So I have these open sores. And so when a staph infection went around, I got it like that. I had
Mhm.
no health insurance. I had no money. I had gone to the emergency room once when I was like 19, for a really bad asthma attack, that was my first near-death experience was asthma when I was a kid.
Mhm.
So I have a relationship with this, a big fear relationship at this time. So I go to the ED and they charged me like $30,000 for, being in there for 10 minutes. So when I'm in my 20s, there's no way I'm going to the hospital. There's no way I'm seeking any care. And this staph infection just spread through my whole body like quickly, days. And about a week into it, I had gone to the gym to talk to people. I hadn't been training. I went in there to go and talk to the coaches there, and they were like, dude, you need to go to a doctor now. And I didn't know what to do. So I called around and I said, hey, I got staph. I don't have any insurance. I don't have any money. Eventually, somebody saw me for $100. It was like my last $100. And they loaded me up with antibiotics. It cleared up the staph infection, but it shot my immune system. So then later on, like a month or two later, a staph infection went around again. I got it again. And this time it was probably still in my system and it mutated into MRSA very quickly.
Mm.
So I had just these huge wounds on my body. And this time around, I went to a doctor much quicker. There was a doctor through the gym. I was teaching the kids class, and there was one of the parents was connected, and he gave me a connection to a doctor. So they saw me much quicker this time, loaded me up with antibiotics again, cleared it up over the course of a couple weeks. But then about a month later, I got pneumonia. So my immune system was just totally cashed. I had no support physically or with my immune system. It just wasn't capable of defending anything. And I got pneumonia. And in that situation, I laid in my bed for about a week, quite literally on my deathbed. just constantly in and out of consciousness. And eventually, one of my friends really realized, and of course, I was drinking and, taking painkillers at this time too. One of my friends noticed something was going on, and he made some phone calls and got me some more antibiotics. Luckily, that cleared it up, and but through the combination of the pneumonia, being having no energy, no reserves, no real ability to fight this off, and then the drinking too, of course. The combination of all of that just pushed me right over the edge. And on the other hand, though, it was something that really showed me the way I was living my life and gave me this incredible experience that I had that really sparked me to want to figure out what was that human experience that I had, and how could I live my life afterwards? What would that even look like? These were questions I had never even thought of before. So some really good things came out of it.
Did were now when you come, I think I've been sick like that where you kind of everything's a blur and you don't remember and it's just touch and go, bits and pieces. Did when you came out of that, did you quit the pills and alcohol, or did you kind of continue on with that? And when did you eventually quit that, and how did you kind of shed that in your
Hmm.
transformation?
Yeah, I stopped the pills immediately. There was that was a big part of that experience too. So that was gone immediately. And the drinking, I stopped drinking almost entirely, but I was still doing it somewhat socially. So I would go out
Hmm.
to a bar here or there, or a nightclub here or there, because that was where we got all of our social interactions. And I was still getting fairly drunk at those, like wasted at those points. And then about 3 months after that experience, once everything really started to calm down, I just completely stopped drinking everything. And that was when I really started changing everything in my life. Got rid of all the fast food, got rid of all the sodas, all of the sugary processed foods that I was consuming. Really started trying to take my health a little bit more seriously at that point. So that was when I started changing everything and got rid of the bars, got rid of the social circles, everything. The relationships I was in, just cleared out pretty much everything in my life.
Now, when you started kind of transforming yourself, like you're in university, you're studying, you kind of have this experience and you realize like, hey, I've got to change some stuff. And what were, how were you processing it at that time? Like, I understand probably where you are now, just like where I'm at. I'm in a much more aware state, and I'm there because I keep tabs on it. I track things, I journal every day. When you started making some of these changes, how were you, did you like read, study, journal, kind of put it to practice, or what were some of those things that you were doing that started kind of making the positive impact minus, like, let's say, quitting the pills, booze, and all that? Because I know, like, sometimes we can go through these experiences and then where we hit rock bottom and then we start stacking, building back up slowly. And sometimes the building back is actually through subtraction, like subtraction of booze, subtraction of fast food, or
Yeah.
circles. But what were some of the other things outside of those things that you were doing that kind of helped you gain some traction, be it meditation, journaling, um, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah. Well, I replaced all of those addictions that I had, various
Hmm.
ones, whether it was to the alcohol or to, relationships. I was mistaking connection and attachment and, compassion for what my childhood relationships looked like.
Mm,
So I started carving all those out and learning how to be alone. And I had two dogs at the time, so I wasn't like fully alone, but I was
right.
really, yeah, I was isolating with them. And I started spending a lot of time out in nature, just going out into parks and walking barefoot in the ground, and really started connecting with the land. On the one hand, on the other hand, I got super intellectual. I had replaced all of those addictions with intellectualization, really learning concepts and things like that. So when I went to the university, it was all study. I was in my books constantly. I was listening to talks. I was following people. I was learning every one of these concepts as thoroughly as I could, and really trying to not just be able to, repeat all of the information, but
Right.
to really understand how it was working. And that was when I was doing that, of course, I had fixated originally on like Jungian psychology and Joseph Campbell mythology because they were talking about these exact experiences that I had, this near-death experience. The way that they were describing it was identical. So that was the first big lead that I had found in understanding what I had gone through. And through studying that, I was starting to find, wait a minute, all throughout human history, every single culture has had a sacred, highly respected place in their society for these types of ceremonies, for these types
Hmm.
of rituals, where they would work with a substance or they would do some sort of practice, be it meditation, fasting, a sun dance, isolation, sensory deprivation, whatever it is, to induce this type of experience. And this experience was held in some of the most highest regards all throughout human history. So when I found that type of information, I was just so deeply imbued in it. I couldn't stop reading it. And through that, I had found all sorts of incredible teachers who were talking about modern day psychedelic experiences. They were talking about the medical literature and how these were being used to treat things like addictions,
Hmm.
PTSD, chronic depression. And when I found that, that was when I just got so deeply into it and was studying all of these forms of therapy and all these healing techniques, and of course, applying it to myself. Again, knowing how to meditate and how to do this for yourself conceptually is one thing. So it wasn't just studying and reading the books. It was then I'm going to experiment with, can I hold my attention for 10
Yeah.
seconds? Can I focus on one thing can I stay present in this moment for a certain amount of time? And just to do it for 5 or 10 seconds was incredibly difficult because I was so disconnected from myself.
Yeah.
So I didn't work with any psychedelics well into my 30s. I was just studying it. I studied it for about 7 or 8 years, learning as much as I could. And that's when I started, when I was in my 30s, really experimenting with myself.
Well, I love what you said about kind of that being alone. I'm an only child, so I almost require a bit of alone time.
Hmm.
But I used to always make the analogy of when you would see friends growing up around you, guys or girls who they go from, you see girls who go from guy to guy to guy. Or I had a
Yeah.
friend who went from girl to girl to girl. And it's like, well, what kind of music do you like? It was whatever they were listening to. Like he had none of his own opinions or his own
Yeah.
stuff. And, um, people forget that they're, you need to be solid with self. um, that is like a requirement. And I've always had this viewpoint of like, I don't know if it's from being in hospitals as a kid and knowing that life is chicken today and feathers tomorrow, but life, you could have everything. You could have the best wife and kids one day, and the next minute they're gone, and your life is completely changed. And so you're still going to have to wake up and face yourself in the mirror every day. And that was kind of something I've always subscribed to, and where I never felt like I needed anyone. Like if you can have someone to um, be a value add to your life, then that's fine. But I think there's really something valuable and something to be said for kind of being self-sufficient and being okay being alone. Um,
Hmm.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
we have
need
to
it.
learn to rely on ourselves and to connect with ourselves and to value our own self, our own company in lots of ways. And one of the ways that we usually adapt to pain is we disconnect from it. Like when we're going through it as children, for instance, there's only a couple things that you can do. You can set boundaries with the people who are causing the pain. But for somebody in my situation and for most kids, we don't even know
Or
what a boundary is. And
well,
if we were to
and yeah, the adults are setting the boundaries.
Yeah. And so if you express a boundary as a child, most of the times it'll make your situation more dangerous, more
Hmm.
intense. So that's out the window. You could go away physically, which I did when I was about 13 years old. But to survive out there as a child when the attachment is the most important thing for you, it's so incredibly threatening and dangerous. So you literally are piquing all of your survival instincts by leaving. So the third option is the most reasonable survival mechanism is we go away mentally. We disconnect from our emotions, we suppress our emotions, we suppress our boundaries, we suppress our expression, and we use various mechanisms of distraction to take us away from our emotions and our feelings. this becomes addictions later on in life. So we need various things, whether it's me studying constantly, that was a form of escape for me.
Yeah.
We can also get very addicted to relationships, to always having somebody there with us because whatever it is that we're engaging with them, listening to their music or having conflicts with them or having sex, whatever it is, takes us away from all of those emotions and feelings that we're having here. So there's so many things that we can get addicted to, and that codependency, always being in the relationships with people, is another form that we can get very much addicted to, and it provides short-term relief for us, just like any addiction, but it also has very long-term consequences for that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I agree with you. Learning how to be alone with yourself and to value yourself and to enjoy your own company is very important, and a lot of people have to go through that.
The other significant thing that I picked up on earlier in the conversation was when you talked about how you were kind of the mirror for the parents who didn't like each other's behavior. Um, and, you know, I think about, so my wife and I, we've been together 19 years, but we have daughters who are older, and they were 2 and 3 when her and I got together. And the ex-husband and I get along, and it's a tribe, it takes us all. But it's the same way. My wife early on in our relationship was like, I'm never going to talk shit about their dad to the the girls. It's not healthy. There's no point in it. And what you were talking about, being that mirror, and you see that um, even children in modern day, that hey, divorced parents who constantly dog out the other parent, it's not helping. And if you could do that, you think, well, as parents, just because maybe you married somebody else and you're providing a quote unquote stable home or what a family should look like, well, when you're doing that, you're still, you know. And I was like, man, I never really looked at it that way, but I can see how that could be so detrimental to a child. And the problem is the parents don't even know that they're doing it. Because one of my biggest realizations in the past 2 to 3 years has been that, you know, be it, let's say, the legalization of marijuana and psychedelic therapy even being available, or podcasting, is that, you know, your parents, my parents, they came with all these beliefs from time frames that were much more volatile, much more segregated, and much more hatred out there. And they don't, the people from those generations, I mean, we're trying to shed all that and step into new things, like learning that, well, maybe marijuana wasn't terrible. Maybe psychedelics aren't terrible. Maybe alcohol's a fucking problem. But that we accept and make it okay. Um, but stuff like that, yeah, the generational stuff is big. And I'm a Gen Xer, and I don't know why, but um, I feel like a lot of the people I have these conversations with, is there's some sort of similarity in that we feel like we're the generational curse breakers of our family's bullshit.
Yeah, you're nailing it right now, in the sense that that's really the responsibility of our age, is to, you're talking about this intergenerational trauma.
Hmm.
So when the parents are dogging on each other and they're attacking and blaming each other, that is a traumatic experience. It's a result or an expression of terrible pain that they're going through, that they don't know how to process. They don't know how to express it. So it comes bursting out the seams in very inappropriate ways, and that pain flows from one generation to the next. So it is absolutely our responsibility to become aware of these patterns and to start to exercise some choice and some responsibility for them, to ultimately liberate ourselves from them by choosing something new. And it can be in so many things, like you were talking about, like our relationship with things like cannabis or with psychedelics and alcohol. We're handed these ways of processing information, these perceptions, these ways of thinking about things, whether that's what we do with our emotions, the way that we relate with each other, or the way we relate with the world around us. And so much of it has been, guided and directed towards very specific ends, such as profit at all costs, regardless of the amount of destruction that's caused from it. And a lot of people right now are really waking up, and I think that it's our responsibility as people who are here right now to, again, become aware of these patterns and to start to exercise and cultivate the ability to make choices and to take responsibility for ourselves and, try and do some things differently.
So walk us through your first psychedelic experience. What, you mentioned, hey, you were diving in head first, all in. Um, what made you decide to want to try it? What was it like leading up to it? Were you nervous, excited? And then what was that first psychedelic experience like, and what did you get from it afterwards?
Yeah. So I was diving headfirst into it full on by consuming all the information about it. Like for 7, maybe 8 years, I had consumed all the literature, all the medical literature, all the studies that were done through the 60s, 70s, everybody who was doing them currently. I was learning every technique about it that I could. Um, and I wasn't working with the psychedelic myself. I was trying to figure out how I could get there on my own through meditation, for instance, through self-reflection and inquiry. But again, those patterns are just so deeply entrenched that
Yeah.
I had developed with that it was so difficult to even imagine what it would look like to do something different. So I had, finished university and I went on this crazy bike trip for 8 months cross country and landed on the
Like
west
motorcycle or pedal?
pedal
Oh,
bicycle.
wow.
It was me, two other people, and then my two dogs as well. So
Mm,
it was a group of us, and we landed in Portland here. I wanted to go to the West Coast. One, I was trying to get into graduate school out here, and two, the atmosphere, the culture around psychedelics was totally different out here.
yeah.
So I wanted to get out here, and when we landed after that bike trip, the treadmill was dialed up to level 10. Bills, finances, all coming in. And we had no money when we went on that trip. Like we barely had enough money to sustain us on that. And we were camping every single night. We did not get any hotels. We're just buying food pretty much. And so when we got here, we had just enough money to pay for our first month's rent. And, you got 4 weeks and you got to have enough money to make the next rent. So the stress was so high. And I went into working at the university. It took me about 3 weeks, and I finally got my first job. And after applying to 200 jobs, I finally got called back, and I get a $12 an hour job where I'm working in a closet crammed in there with 5 other people, and we're just treated like absolute scum. Just anybody who wants to come and take a dump on us, that's our job pretty much is
Yeah.
to just take it. So the suicidal depression that I had been dealing with my whole life came back, and it came back strong.
Now, did
It
you
was
have any of those, any SI, suicidal ideation, like on the trip, any dread, or because I'm looking at the interesting contrast of like this excitement of setting off on a journey that's
Mhm.
almost the most exciting part of your life, but then, like you said, then all of a sudden the anxiety gets dialed up to 10 because guess what? In 4 more weeks, and then 3 weeks in, you get a job that you're totally shit on.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, the bike trip was so incredible because it was something I had never done. It's something that most people never do.
right. So it
We
was
had
more
given up.
freeing.
It was very freeing. And, when you give up your apartment, and for somebody like me, I had an eviction on my record from when I was 19 years old.
Hmm.
To rent an apartment was incredibly challenging. So we gave up my only source of safety,
Right.
gave up all my possessions, and everything that I had, I was on my bike. So once we got out there and we were on the road and we look at the map and we're like, whoa, we are far away from where we started. It kind of sets in, and the anxiety is always present. There's always that sense of impending doom. There's always something that's going to go wrong, and I didn't have any money, so I always knew I was gonna have to figure it out. There was always that stress. But when we got to Portland and I couldn't find a job that paid more than $12 an hour, yeah, the stress, the everything was super high. And so then I had kind of agreed with myself that I wasn't going to seek any psychedelics. I was going to wait for them to come to me. And I was going to continue to do my own practice on my own. But my own practice wasn't going anywhere because I didn't know what this looks like. I had never experienced it on my own. I was just trying and trying and trying and getting nowhere. And that was when somebody I had met and was like, hey, do you want some LSD? And I said, well, sure. Yeah. And so I took some of it and I went back to my apartment and I was preparing myself for about a week as well as I could. And I took a very small dose, like one tab, and I
Hmm.
just had this beautiful, incredible, open experience where all the visuals, LSD is so symbolic and visual and mental. So I just
Did you set
saw,
intentions and all that like in the week prior when you were,
yeah,
'cause since you've studied it? I mean, I
hmm
can tell you my first experience wasn't as intentional.
yeah,
It was an intentional as I was going to take it,
yeah,
but
of
I didn't
course.
set any intentions, and
hmm
I wasn't seeking out, what I understand it to be now.
Yeah, of course. Well, when I'm in this situation, while I understand at a conceptual level how this works, I'm setting intentions, but the intentions I'm setting are not the way that I should be setting them.
Right.
They are leading me down a very difficult path. I happen to have beliefs about myself that things have to be intense. If they're not intense, it's not worthwhile. Everything for me as a child was super intense. So if
Oh,
things aren't intense, I can't feel anything. So
man.
my belief about this experience is that it has to be intense. You see how I'm leading myself into a very difficult
Yeah, because
time.
I just did a solo episode for my Unfiltered Friday where I talked about kind of being stuck in a fucking pattern. Even though it's a
hmm
shitty pattern and it's painful, it's still comfortable.
Yep,
And I
exactly.
was
So that's
thinking,
all
like,
you
I
know.
didn't realize, like, the fact that your childhood was so fucking dialed up that
hmm
normal actually feels abnormal.
Exactly. Or safe feels dangerous,
Yeah.
or setting boundaries is threatening, or having emotions is a survival threat. Because if I would have expressed an emotion when I was a kid, quite literally, the gorilla that was in the room was going to harm me in ways that would have significantly threatened my survival. And it happened, right? So I have all this pain, this incredible pain, these emotions, these beliefs about myself, these entrenched patterns of what I do with it. And while I'm setting intentions, while I'm wanting to work with it, I have no idea what that looks like. I'm blind, just stumbling around. And so my first trip, it went really well. I gotta say, I mean,
Mhm.
the LSD was just, it was perfect for me. And I was like, wow, I can really see how this works. But it was kind of like dipping my toes in the water.
Yeah.
And so I did it again, another small dose. And this time, a lot of that pain and turmoil started coming up to the surface, as it does. And I didn't know what to do with it. I had no idea of what to do with emotions. I couldn't even recognize them. They were these big, overwhelming, terrifying, scary monsters, and I wanted to avoid them at all costs. And so the LSD really brought it up for me. And then afterwards, it was just sticking with me. And I'm going into the job and I'm just like, this is miserable. My whole life sucks. I can't keep doing this. And I was really starting to think suicidal thoughts. They were so deeply entrenched in me. It was so common. And it was getting to the point where that was like probably 80, 90% of all that I was thinking about. And so I had this intention of, I'm going to do a very big psychedelic experience. And I hear in the literature, I see it all over the place.
Right.
A big psychedelic experience can rewire your brain and it can rewire the depression and it can heal you like that. That's what I know. I know it this can heal me. Wrong. Wrong. That is not how it works at all. But that was so misleading in so much of the literature. So anyway, I took a very large dose, and my intention was I want to have a real human experience. I want to be able to get back to living. I want to get past this suicidal depression. And I mean, you can probably see just from that intention right there, that is going to be a very challenging, stressful time. And it really brought so many things up for me that I just was not prepared to work with. And I made it through that experience and the months afterwards by the skin of my teeth. Like barely got through that. I didn't have the support. I didn't have anybody there to go with it through it with me to say, this is the pattern that you're in right here. This is what
Right.
it looks like. And this is something you can do differently. I didn't have any of that. I was doing it all on my own because, again, I had a belief about myself. Not that it just has to be intense, but I have to be strong and independent and do everything
Well, but
alone.
not only that though, just your childhood when you look at how your mom was married more times and kind of you're this odd person out. You're often soloed out, and I suffer from this
Mhm.
too, from being an only child. I mean, one of the greatest things is I'm confident and comfortable enough to be alone. But
Yeah.
you know, it's hard for us to see when healthy alone time becomes isolation
Hmm.
and we really need the connection because I'm just fine with it.
Exactly. And, reaching out and asking for help is something that it was like a spectrum of light that I was unable to perceive. It was a color I couldn't even see. I didn't know what asking for help even looked like. So I
Yeah.
went through it all on my own. And this experience was so profound. It stuck with me so much. I had death and rebirth experience. I had seen how negative and how toxic and harmful my patterns with myself, my relationship with myself, what I was doing with my emotions, all these things were harming me. Of course, I didn't know what to do about that. But for just a moment in that experience, I had caught a glimpse of what it would look like to be on the other side of this, to know how to express and soothe and comfort my emotions, and to express boundaries and to have healthy, functional relationships with people. I caught just a small glimpse of that, and it gave me just enough inspiration to say, I want to get to that. And so, for the next few years, I just again started trying to figure out, okay, it's not the psychedelic experience that I need. I need to learn how to recognize, identify my emotions. I need to learn how to express my emotions. I need to learn how to accept them and comfort and soothe them. I need to understand these patterns that I'm in. And if I could start to do that, then I will heal a lot of this pain that I'm in. And it's not the psychedelic that I need for that. That was one thought that I had. And then, of course, I kept running into these walls and my body was getting super sick and I didn't have any options. So then I would refer to psychedelics again,
Hmm.
but I would do it in what I believed at the time to be a much more therapeutic setting, like going and working with indigenous down in Peru, for instance, in the
Hmm.
Amazon. Very different from doing it on my own. Again, that didn't lead me to what I was looking for or what I was really needing at that time. So it was really trying to figure out, just like I think Jerry Garcia from the Grateful Dead said this. He goes, we never stop thinking about those psychedelic experiences. We were thinking about them all the time. We just wanted to figure out how can I get back to that state and make it easier on myself. And that was the goal that I was having, is how can I get into that state where I can connect with myself deeply? How can I start to see these patterns and rewrite them and choose new patterns in a way that isn't going to be so stressful? And that was when I really started working with direct, not just studying with people, not
Hmm.
just emailing, not just reading and listening to their talks, but directly working with people who knew how to do this. And when I started doing that, everything started changing.
So that was kind of so like you're stuck in the $12 an hour job, getting shit on your high level emotions, trying to get through this. And so you kind of keep seeking out. I know like for me, it's so weird, like because things take so much longer, like transformation does. Sometimes it seems like it happens all at once, but it takes so long in a way. I know,
Hmm.
like for me, losing 65 pounds, and it was just a series of things. Like in 2022, I was just in a bad place. And, it took literally probably a couple of years to really turn it around. Is
Yeah.
that about what it kind of took for you? Like getting out of the 12, you just kind of start making small adjustments, like you get out of the job, then your mental health is a little better. And then you're continuing to study on experience and kind of progressively gets a little better. But would you say that kind of working with other integrators who kind of showed shown you what you were supposed to be looking at and for, is that kind of where the big pivotal change happened that kind
Yeah.
of allowed you to become into who you were to now work with others and provide that?
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of the times we hear, like I was saying with what I had heard from the literature,
Hmm.
is that it's a quick, immediate fix. There's immediate changes, there's immediate healing that happens here, and certainly that does happen. It certainly can. I see it. I help people, and they can get immediate changes, immediate relief, just from a 5 minute conversation. 5 minutes into a conversation, we can get directly to the core of their pain, and
Hmm.
they can start to change their relationship with it very quickly. And of course, when people work with psychedelics in those circumstances, yes, you can absolutely get immediate transformation, but that's not always the case. And even when they do get that immediate transformation, okay, something shifted. Now we have to maintain it. Now we have
Right.
to develop it. Now we have to nurture it. So this new pattern, so this new practice can mature, and it matures over time.
The
It's
real work
like
begins.
yeah, exactly. The real practice,
Yeah.
right? The real practice of continuing this lifestyle. That's what we're doing is creating a new livelihood with intention, with mindfulness, with choice, agency, and responsibility. And so we're continuing to live our lives differently, and we have to do that constantly. It's like, when I grow an acorn, and there's a part of me that as soon as I put it in the soil and I start nurturing it, I want the forest. I want to walk underneath these, magnificent ancient oak trees with all the animals and birds and all the fauna and all the other plants that are growing in there. And I want to see the fruits of all my work. But there's something so special about seeing that very first oak leaf that sprouts and how vibrant and how much life is inside that one fragile and delicate leaf that could easily die just like that. But I am going to nurture it and I'm going to take care of this oak and help it develop. I'm going to give it all the right nutrients that it needs so that way it can grow and develop. And then a year later, they're this big, and 2 years later, they're this big, and I'm watching it. And all of this growth and development is the fruit of my nurturing it. It's very similar to when we're taking care of ourselves. We want to see the immediate results. We want to be healed and enlightened, and we want to, drink green tea and feel great. But at the same time, we still want to slap people. We still go, we're
Hmm.
still got all this rage and anger, and we don't know what to do with it. So one step at a time in nurturing ourselves, learning how to recognize, oh, there's my anger. This is
Hmm.
coming all the way back from childhood. This is pain from the past showing up here now, and I'm projecting it onto my partner, or I'm projecting it onto my dogs, or I'm projecting it onto my friends, or onto my children. And I'm going to take responsibility for that now. I'm going to comfort this. I'm going to soothe this pain. I'm going to express it in constructive ways. I'm going to make choices here. And that's steadily watching the oak tree grow. And every time you engage with it and you see it and you nurture it, you're like, wow, look at all these new leaves. Look at all these new branches. This is the result of me nurturing this. Sometimes it's needing different nutrients. Sometimes you're looking
Yeah.
at it like, oh, wow, this tree is not growing the way that I want it to. And you don't get mad at the tree and you don't say, it's your fault. I blame you. No, I'm giving it the wrong nutrients. I'm doing something wrong here. I need to adjust my way of nurturing this tree. And that tree is myself. And so the more
And
I can
I
adjust
think
that,
like the nutrients of the world is love.
yeah,
Like every
yeah,
time you say nutrients, I go love, like love yourself.
yeah.
And
And
when
what
you
does that
take
look like?
psychedelics, you see that love is kind of the underlying theme that a lot of this
Yeah.
stuff we've invented to soothe ourselves is mere distraction.
Precisely. But for somebody like me who never knew what it was like to be held by a parent, I
Right.
mean, obviously I got some amount of that as a child
Right.
because I survived, but I survived, by a thread. And, for somebody like me or so many people out there who never know what love actually looks like, or we mistake it for judgment and criticism and evaluation and punishment and conflict, how do you even how do you discover what love looks like? It's like, again, it's like a color that you're blind to. You can't see it.
But also, if
You're
somebody beat you every day and they told you love you, then you could say, oh, that's what love is. Because that's
precisely,
what you learned that love was.
exactly. yeah, we can mistake love and compassion for abuse and for pain and conflict. So, a psychedelic is so powerful because it brings things to your awareness, first of all. All the pain that we're carrying, all those patterns that we have, all the ways that we're constricted, all the ways that we adapted to the trauma that helped us, might have even saved our lives in the short term, but now cause us pain, all of those come directly to our awareness. So if we're prepared to engage with it, if we've already built a relationship and we can identify it and recognize it, accept that it's here and comfort it, then we can start to choose something else. The psychedelic's so good then at writing new patterns very quickly. And we can immediately carve out new neurological patterns so fast. And another thing that it does is it can oftentimes show us things that are outside of the spectrum of what we already know. So for me, I had no idea what compassion looked like. Every one of my
Mm.
relationships was fairly abusive and, confrontational. There was lots of conflict and judgment and evaluation, so on. So for the first time through a psychedelic experience, I really saw firsthand what does it look like to experience unconditional compassion. And then I realized, oh, this is in my life. I have multiple people in my life who give this to me, especially my dogs, for instance, but I was
Right.
blind to it. I couldn't even see it.
Mm.
So being able to experience something outside of the spectrum of what we already know or what we can identify is so powerful because then, okay, now I know what this looks like. Now I can really start to develop my capacity to cultivate this,
Yeah.
to build it in myself and share it with others.
Yeah. You know that, and that's the thing is, I mean, I know like for me, my struggles often provide that empathy that wants me to share it with others because I mean, of course, hey, if I just had the best fucking burger I ever had, of course I want you to know about it. How did you get into being a facilitator and deciding that where was that moment that like this is it, I know this is my path, my purpose? Did you have any doubts? And how did you get into it? And I know you're in a prime spot in Portland because the availability or the allowance there. Um, I know it still goes on everywhere, and I think I think it should be legal everywhere. But that definitely gave you a leg up. But how did you get into it, deciding that this was what you were gonna pursue?
Yeah, I think I knew pretty early on when I first came across that this is what I wanted to do.
Hmm.
Um, when I was studying in university and I was, studying addiction psychology, clinical psychology, training to be a therapist, there was not a single time through all of that where I said, that's the path for me. I'm going to be a therapist. I'm going to help people. I wanted to heal myself. And
Hmm.
I really did want to work with other people, but I knew this was not the path that I was going to follow. But as soon as I came across very specific teachers that were in this field, it clicked. And I knew right there, this is what I want to pursue at all costs. Um, of course, there were figuring out how I was going to do that
Yeah.
was something that I had to uncover over a course of a decade, right? When I started having these experiences and then I saw how powerful the psychedelic experience could be, which you read that in the books, you read it in the literature, you hear people talk about it, and until you experience it, you don't know how
Right.
powerful this is. And I saw how dangerous it could be too.
Hmm.
I saw the power in the healing that could be there, and I also experienced myself how much this could exacerbate things by bringing all of that pain to the surface if you're not ready to work with it. So now it's at the surface and you can't avoid it, you can't distract from it. All you can do is see it and focus on it, and you don't know what to do with it. What do you do? So when that happened to me, I had seen how much it could heal and how much it could also harm. Its double-edged sword, so to speak. That was when everything else that I was focusing on just got dropped. And all of my attention went to figuring out how can I get to that space and make it more therapeutic. And so I
Almost like
started,
co-regulation, teaching a kid co-regulation, having a facilitator there because the thing
precisely.
was is yeah, I can remember like using psychedelics maybe as a younger man and then as an older man, the difference
Hmm.
with intentions versus like say just having the experience.
Yeah.
But never for 1 minute did I ever take into consideration that whatever this is going to bring up for me, I need to be ready to deal with it. And if I'm not ready to deal with it, or I can't identify it or don't know what it is, then it could be helpful to have somebody there to help me.
Yeah. It's an essential, right? And at that time, again, my beliefs were I have to be strong and independent and do it myself because my whole life had been that. If anything was going to happen in my life, it was because I went out and did it. I couldn't rely on anybody. And if I ever relied on somebody when I was younger, it would usually come back to bite me. I would usually get some consequence for that. And I would always
Yeah.
say, well, that's why I don't trust other people.
Mine is like I just let it I brought it up and just let it sit there and I'm like, oh, you brought up some information and it's like, well, you just fucking waste it. Like throw it in the
Yeah.
closet or something. I'm like, never once did I think about part of the therapeutic event is taking what came up and doing something with it, addressing it somehow. I
Yeah.
just never did. I just let it come up and was like, oh, cool.
Yeah. And that's the whole point of it, right? Is, you know, a lot of the times that's what we've been doing is we take the psychedelic or we induce the psychedelic experience however we can, and then we just see what comes up. And that can be fun and recreational for a lot of people. You know, you can take some LSD and go to a festival
Right.
or something like that, like a lot of people do, and you might have a good time. But I started going into these psychedelic support groups here that they were having in Portland because of how fluent and common the culture was. And it was person after person after person who was saying, I got traumatized through this. It made things so much worse for me. All of these things came up for me through this experience, and I didn't know what to do with it. They weren't
Mhm.
communicating it in that sense, but they were saying it, and I was
And that's how you
identifying it.
picked up. And you're like, ah,
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, and it makes perfect sense too, because when you're talking about this co-regulation thing, humans develop through what's referred to in like neurobiology as interpersonal neurobiology,
mhm,
which means that children are born, we're super undeveloped, immature, and dependent on our
right.
caregivers for the longest amount of time. Humans take years to learn how to run, to where a horse learns how to run on their first day of life. So the attachment is the most important thing. And while our nervous system, our emotional circuits, our hormonal systems, everything in our body is developing, what this term interpersonal neurobiology means is that our bodies are literally downloading information from the mature regulated nervous system that's there. But then what happens, of course, if you don't have a mature regulated nervous system or the people around you are, you know,
Yeah.
undeveloped themselves,
I
is
never
you
learned how
develop
to
that.
co-regulate because yeah, I never learned to self-regulate because nobody ever fucking co-regulated with me.
Exactly. And that's what happens to so many of
I
us.
learned this at 45.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Terrible.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and it's also wonderful that you were able to.
Yeah. Well,
Be-
because, but the thing was, is because I have an 11-year-old and it's like when she was 6, 7, 8 and all that and developing and, it was like I would notice my frustration. She was the mirror to me
Mhm.
and I didn't like what I saw. And I did not want her to feel the way I feel when she is my age.
Yeah.
And so I felt that it was crucial for me to make a change and figure something out.
Yeah. That's exactly what you were talking about taking the responsibility. See, there was a pain that was passed through or flowed through the generations in your family. You learned that from somewhere, most likely your parents, and they learned it
Mhm.
from somewhere, most likely their parents.
I can
This
confirm
pain,
that.
yeah, that's just the way it goes. This is how intergenerational trauma works. It just goes through us and it's slimy and sneaky and it's got these withering tentacles that get into every crevice and they just grow and flourish. And it's really up to each one of us to identify, oh, there it is inside of me. And it's not that we intentionally pass it down to the next generation. We don't say, you know, my 11-year-old daughter is going to learn all the pain that I mean, some parents do. Some
Yeah.
parents they very much want to bring other people into the pain, and even then, it's not a conscious choice. It's that they have so much pain that they're alone with it and they can't be alone with it, so they bring others into it.
Mm.
but this pain just flows through us unconsciously, unintentionally, and then we find it in the next generation. And it's our responsibility to say, okay, I've got to take some accountability here. I've got to start to change this pattern inside myself. I've got to comfort, I got to soothe this pattern so it doesn't have so much control over me. So that way it doesn't get handed down directly to the next generation. And then, of course, the input for the next generation is completely different than what we had. And
Yeah.
they can work with it and transform it. It's this generational alchemy. So while we want to see the immediate results, of course, we're also playing a very long game of transformation here
Yeah.
through the generations. It's incredible.
Yeah. Because it's like, I think about it too in terms of it. It's so complex yet so simple because it's like, okay, you're in Portland, but let's pretend you were in a country that America hated right now. But the thing is if I have this understanding that, guess what? You have the same generational human pain experience that I have. It just looks different.
Yeah,
It's just in a different environment and different setting, or maybe you call it something different. But the thing is regardless of our color, religion, language, any of that bullshit, is like that basic understanding that, you know what, maybe together I could help you with something and you could help me with something.
yeah,
But we're in this experience together and let's share it and lift each other up and thrive and be there for one another as opposed to making it the reason that we absolutely want to knock each other out, you know,
precisely,
because
precisely.
it's all the same. But
Yeah.
um, when you, so let's say I wanted to work with you, this is what you do for a living. What
Mhm.
kind of clients come to you? What are like the qualifiers? If I thought like whether it's trauma or is it somebody just wants a psychedelic experience, or how do people find you and what kind of people are they?
Mhm. Yeah, it really depends on what you're looking for. I don't think I don't think I've ever worked with somebody who was just looking for to have this psychedelic
Right,
experience. I mean, in that sense, there's lots of options for people, and I think that they find some of those other options. I've had a couple people who have come through that said that they wanted to do that, and very quickly, within, minutes of a conversation, it turned out to that was what they were telling themselves, but they had a tremendous amount of trauma that they were wanting to work with, and
right.
this was the doorway for that. Every single person that I've worked with, every single person that I've ever met is carrying around a significant amount of trauma. And all of the ways that they've adapted to it are their personality traits. It's the way that they live their lives that they say, this is just how I am. But almost every one of those is an adaptation to trauma. So that's what we work on when people come and see me is we're going to identify how the pain from the past shows up in the present and how can we take responsibility and accountability for it. Every person's working through trauma
And
that
then
that
what
I've
kind
worked
of
with.
work, like, are they like if I said, hey, I need to release some trauma, I want to come to you. What does the facilitation look like? Is it a
Mhm,
overnight stay? Is it a day thing? Is it multiple days? And
mhm.
do you have like a pre-screening type of thing? Do you have
Yeah.
criteria of what makes you work with people or not work with
Mhm.
people?
Yeah, yeah, I'll walk you through it if you want.
Yeah,
Yeah, so the first thing is when people fill out a form just to work with me, is I ask very specific questions about these things. And there's thresholds and barriers that people have to go through just to find me.
right.
Granted, I'm putting this information out there a lot more now, but for the most part, you got to do some looking and you've got to do some finding
Yeah,
to get to me, and that's intentional on my behalf.
yeah,
So when people have already found me, don't get me wrong, a lot of people who are not actually looking for this experience and are not ready for it, they do come through. They do find me, they reach out, and they usually identify that pretty quickly, like, oh, this wasn't what I was looking for. But when people fill out that first form, the first thing we do is just a consultation, free 30 minutes. We just chat. And if people decide that they do want to do this, and I decide, or my business partner decides that yes, this is something that could work for us, then we do a screening session, and it's 2 hours, and it's over the phone because a lot of the people are remote, and even if they're in person, we do this over the phone too.
Hmm.
2 hours, the first hour and a half, pure therapy. We're going to go straight for the core of what's bringing them in. I'm going to figure it out, and that's my job. I'm not going to do anybody favors by dancing around this thing or playing
Right.
them. You're going to come and see me weekly for a year, and then you'll identify. No, 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 no. We're getting straight to it. And almost every person that I've ever worked with says, "Wow, in the first 5 minutes, we got to things that no therapist, no doctor has ever noticed it before." And we do it in a way that is not, we're not trying to judge it or criticize it. We're trying to get very curious about it and understand, why is this here? What purpose does
Well,
it serve? What's the teaching? And in that appointment, we're going to start to build a practice that we develop and cultivate where you're going to, as the client, start to work with this pain that you're experiencing. And you're going to start to build a relationship with it. And you're going to start to transform your relationship with it immediately.
build a
So,
relationship with pain. That's
yeah,
interesting. A lot of us want it to go away or we ignore it.
precisely. And that's the adaptation to trauma. That's one of the biggest disconnections or responses to trauma is we disconnect from what we're feeling. And you can't just disconnect from pain. You can't just say it like it's a buffet. I will get rid of the pain. I'll get rid of the anger. I'll have no fear, and I'll just take all the joy. That's going to work. No, 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 no. It doesn't work like that. So the trauma is we disconnect from our emotions, we disconnect from what we're feeling, and we become numb, and we look for distractions to stay away from the pain. So we have to get a lot more comfortable with the discomfort. We have to build our ability to go into those painful things. It's like with our kids. Like, of course, we don't want our kids to suffer. So, what do we do? Well, if we try to take away their pain, if we try to protect them and shelter them and take away all the loss and all the hardship that they'll experience, we take away so much human experience. And then at some point, we have to go away one way or another, and then they're on their own, and then they can't deal with anything that's happening in this world. So it's not that we want to take away the pain, we want to learn how to navigate it. We want to learn how to go through it. We want to learn how to take care of ourselves and meet our needs while going through difficult times. That's what we're going to start to build right away. So they'll start to get a practice in, and they'll start to shape it, and they're going to go work on it. And then we start doing preparation if we move forward. The way I actually structure that appointment is, there's a cost for it,
Hmm.
but if they don't want to move forward, if we do the appointment and for whatever reason they say this isn't for me, I don't charge anybody anything. So there's no financial obligation to move forward. If you move forward, it's strictly because you want to do so.
Right.
So then we move forward and we start doing weekly preparations. And I do a minimum after that 2 hour screening session, I do a minimum of 3 hour and a half preparation sessions. And a lot of the times people opt to do more because they start to get immediate transformation just from doing this. And so we meet weekly. If you're in person, great, you come into my studio. And if you're out of state or out of the country, which a lot of people are, we do it over the phone and we talk like this. And what we're going to do is for that hour and a half is we're going to figure out all the ways that this pain from the past keeps showing up in the present. And we're going to continuously relate with it. And we're going to connect with it. And we're going to figure out what the needs underneath this pain are. What were the things when you first started feeling this pain? What were the things that you needed that you didn't get? And very commonly, it's the exact same things. And so the question becomes, okay, the pain from the past of unmet needs is showing up in the present. Who's the person who's got to meet those needs? Well, it's a rhetorical question. The answer is us. We've got to do it ourselves. There's nobody else. We can't expect our partners to be our parents. We can't expect our
Right.
children to be our parents, although that happens very frequently.
Hmm.
So we learn to be the person that we needed that we didn't have. And that allows us a tremendous foundation to go and work with that pain. So then our intentions start to form and we start to say, okay, I carry this pain around. There's a part of me that still hurts. And this part of me wants to step up anytime something in the environment remotely reminds me of that pain. I get triggered, and this defense mechanism inside of me gets activated. And I want to go in and comfort that pain. I want to go in and soothe that pain. I want to go connect with it. I want to go and bond with it. I want to go build a relationship and show this pain, this part of me that carries it around, that it doesn't have to be alone anymore, that I'm here with it. And then we use the psychedelic experience as a tool to go into that intention. So all day, what we're doing is going in and focusing on whatever it was that we were working on. If we can have that foundation, if we can already start to identify, take the inventory of what's
Hmm.
inside of us and get familiar with it, when we work with the psychedelic and all of these things start to come up, or even better, we seek them out, we go look for them. They're not some big, scary, overwhelming monster that's going to chase us around throughout the entire psychedelic experience, rather than it being, the giant crab man wearing tidy
Right.
whities that's going to chase us around for 4 hours and we're just going to run away from him at all costs. It's a familiar friend. It's somebody who's been with us since the very beginning. And when we can really see who it is, it usually transforms into a childish version of ourselves that's all alone, that's in tremendous pain and has no idea what to do with it. So they're expressing this pain in whatever means are available. And when we see that, oh, then I can scoop them up, or I can sit with them and I can spend time with them and build the trust and safety. And that's where a lot of transformation happens.
Wow. Yeah. It's interesting. I think once you really learn to understand your own pain, you're able to spot pain out in the world as you walk
Yes.
around.
Hmm.
I Uber, and I absolutely love it because I love connecting with people and making their life better. But as I'm out there, I see a lot of pain in
Yep.
passing.
Hmm.
Um, is there what range of psychedelics do you utilize in your practice? Um, and have you worked with any that are preferential, like let's say in psilocybin, 5-MeO, ayahuasca, any of those, DMT?
Hmm. Yeah, I'll be careful about the
Everything.
wording here of,
Oh
of
yeah,
what we do and what we don't do.
yeah,
Um, I'll talk about my personal relationship with psychedelics. How about that?
yeah.
Um, so the three that I have incredible relationships built with, of course,
Hmm.
are the mushrooms, LSD, and ayahuasca. Um, I'm very careful with ayahuasca because it's local to a very specific region in the world, a
Hmm.
very specific culture. And although I come from a very similar lineage of the people who work with the ayahuasca today, me going down to the Amazon brings in a lot of corruption. It brings in a lot of, I mean, the cultures down there are just so fragile and delicate, and it's quickly turning into an ayahuasca trade. So
Mm.
I don't bring ayahuasca back. I know a lot of people who do. I know a lot of people who facilitate those
It's
around
almost like
here.
bad energy.
It can be. I respect their decision to do so. I'm not going to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do. I make the choice that I'm not going to bring
Yeah.
it out
It's
here.
almost like
I
more
want
of a capitalistic approach as opposed to a
exactly,
philosophical and or medicinal
precisely.
approach.
Precisely. So I want to be very careful to preserve that
Mhm.
experience and that relationship with the plants. So when I do work with ayahuasca, I do so in very, very careful, respectful, intentional manners, and I try to leave as minimal footprint as possible, which is very difficult to do.
Right.
LSD is available everywhere you go. Um, I mean, you can go out here and talk to 10 people, and you'll probably find six people who have it with them, and within a matter of minutes where they could give it to you where I'm at. So it's highly accessible. And that was my first psychedelic, and I built
Hmm.
it. When it took me a while to learn how to really relate and engage with LSD, but when I did, we became very good friends.
Yeah.
And I don't use that in my practice at all. It's too long. It's
Yeah.
too dragged out. The experience is just too. It's an incredible experience. It has wonderful, wonderful therapeutic applications, but I don't have the capacity to do that right now. I use it for myself.
Right.
I use it people who are around me. Of course, I'll help them go through that as well and help them prepare for it in specific ways. But I don't find that very therapeutic for what we're trying to do here. My probably most therapeutic relationship with psychedelics is with the mushrooms.
Hmm.
They grow everywhere. So they're local in everybody's area. I mean, they grow on poop for crying out loud. You can
Hmm.
find these things anywhere. They'll grow in your backyard. They're accessible everywhere. And I find that their personality, their characteristics are so incredibly therapeutic. You know, they're like these cute little clever munchkins that get just a tremendous satisfaction out of doing something very clever that you're able to receive.
Yeah.
So when you can prepare yourself to work with them and you can go in and work with your pain and build the relationship with yourself, and you can take that temperature inventory of your internal climate and you start to enact some choice and responsibility, and then you would invite the mushrooms to come and work with you. Oh, they're so ready and they are down for a great time. And if you can pay attention and engage and participate in that experience, they're ready to roll, and they are incredible teachers, incredible healers, and incredible guides in there too. So I find that in terms of therapeutic approaches,
Mhm.
that's the way to go right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I think psilocybin and LSD are the only two that I've had. And definitely, you know, especially with psilocybin, it's natural kind, as opposed to depending on where you're from, I know where you're located, there is more of a culture, and I would trust grabbing LSD more so. But I
Hmm.
can tell you, um, in places where I'm from in the Southern Bible
Yeah.
Belt, uh, I don't know that I'd be trusting, you know, it was much easier to get way back in the day.
Yeah.
But it's been a minute. But
Hmm.
yeah, I've noticed this stuff for 20 years. I can remember as an undergrad 20 years ago writing papers on, even just the legalization of marijuana.
Yeah.
Um, and it's made strides. And, now we have the psilocybin. Um, it's legal in Oregon, correct?
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
In
I mean,
Colorado?
I want to be careful about talking about the legislation there because it's constantly changing so
Right.
fast. They legalize everything and then they recriminalize it, and
Yeah.
then there's this constant
They're doing the
pendulum
same thing with
swinging.
like that whole the Delta 8, Delta 9 type weed isomers here in
Hmm.
Texas where they're trying to ban the weed
Yeah.
light.
Hmm.
Um, which is crazy. I mean, I just because I think it's like, well, I mean, all you're doing is one, it's a lot of tax revenue for you guys, but then two, it's all you're doing is inviting the black market
Exactly.
in,
Yep.
which I'm not a fan of. I mean,
Yeah.
people do what you want to do, but for me, if people are going to do it, just like alcohol, you should be able to regulate it and go into a store and get it safely.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, if you're
It's
going to
it's
allow that
crazy.
shit everywhere, then why not
Hmm.
allow something that actually has a little bit of use?
Yeah.
Um, do you find that, um, let's say outside of religion, let's just call the idea of something bigger. Um, some people call it religion, whatever, but I've always kind of I have this thought of going, the fact that I wanted to have psychedelic experiences is kind of a ode to seeking more out there, to believing that there is something more than greater than why we're just here having the experience, whether it's purpose, whatever you want to call it. I've had the big book of brain. I can remember being 10 or 11 years old, looking at stuff about the brain, knowing that it was so much more capable. And I think that was probably why I sought out psychedelics. Um, do you
Yeah.
feel kind of the same way that it's people who seek them out are usually looking for something bigger or greater?
Sometimes. Yeah. You know, when so I got really into, the sciences and all the literature, and you start looking at psychedelic experiences, and it's impossible to make the correlation with things like quantum physics,
Hmm.
all contemporary physics. When you start listening to people like Michio Kaku talk about multiple dimensions of reality overlapping on top of one another, on top of our current reality, and you hear people like Graham Hancock talking about the brain being a generator of consciousness or a receiver of consciousness, which modern academia goes with the generation model, which
Hmm.
there's evidence for it, but there's very little evidence. There's lots of contradictory evidence. The idea that our brains could receive consciousness is far more interesting in my opinion. So if you say there's multiple dimensions of reality overlapping one another, and our brains can receive consciousness, and we have the ability to change the channel on which channel of consciousness we receive or which dimension of reality we're going to tune into. You can use psychedelic experiences as a tremendous way to not just explore the world out there, which
Right.
I don't really look at it as an outward exploration ever. In fact, I think that that view might actually be kind of dangerous.
Yeah.
I think that this outward exploration is very much a response to trauma, where we're always seeking the next thing that's going to provide us safety or comfort. Rather, if we can turn our attention inward and focus on our internal landscape and take responsibility and accountability for ourselves, we find really incredible things. I believe it was Irvin Schrödinger who said the total number of minds in the universe is one. So this concept of God and the religion and all of the connection, God always says the way to, or the teachings in Christianity is the way through God is through Jesus, and the idea of Christ consciousness is within yourself. Jesus was very adamant that the way is within. You don't need the preachers, you don't need the church, you don't need the scientists or the modern day religions. The path is within you, the way to God is within yourself. So, regardless of whether we're looking at it from a religious standpoint or a modern contemporary science, in physics, they often say, you can drink all the glasses of modern science, but at the very end of the glass, the very bottom is God always waiting for you. So, whatever we call it, whatever we call this higher power, or whether we're engaging with multiple dimensions of reality or seeking out Christ consciousness or connecting with ourselves, all of the answers are within us. And when we really start to get to the core of these experiences, what I find and what I see from everybody that I work with is we start to see that you and I are exactly the same, and that the wisdom, the knowledge, the God, so to speak, is inside of both of us. You were mentioning this earlier, is that we can see the connection between you and me and between everybody around the world. This disconnection is a response to trauma. It's the biggest trauma is we disconnect from ourselves. We suppress our emotions. We disconnect from our emotions. We disconnect from our feelings. And then it sets off this cascade. If we're disconnected from ourselves, if I can't be with what I'm feeling, if I can't be with my own expression, if I can't be with my own boundaries, how can I ever be with somebody else? If I'm far up in my mind because I'm disconnected from myself, I'm also disconnected from you and disconnected from everybody else. And if I'm disconnected from myself and from everybody else, I'm disconnected from the world around me. And then all the things that I do and create don't represent who I am. So there's just this cascade of disconnections. And the Buddha said that it's because you suffer and it's because I suffer that we can understand one another. So when we have these experiences and we start to go inward and we start to look inward constantly, we'll consistently find that the same wisdom, the same knowledge, the same core of information, whatever we want to call it, is inside of me and it's inside of you. And we become disconnected from it and we can reconnect with it. We can find it again. We can recover this wisdom again. And I think this is a really, really important piece for our current society where we are just so deeply, incredibly disconnected. And the people who are the most disconnected, the people who are always going out there and trying to accumulate all the status and all the wealth and all the power, and they make themselves grandiose and big, and they go and attack other people before they can get attacked, and they accumulate all the resources so they can be powerful and they can be valuable and respected. These are the people that climb to the highest positions of corporate power, of economic power, of political power. They get all of the ability to enact their will on the world. And then you got traumatized people, traumatizing people on a massive scale. So this idea of reconnecting with ourselves and taking accountability, I think, is the most important thing for our age right now.
Man, that was pretty poetic, and I think that's a great place to end. Yeah, 100% ditto. That's the call to action. It's going to be reconnect with yourself. Because, you know, I tell people all the time, we live in one of the greatest times. We have this ability to connect. You know, I've talked to people in New Zealand and all this. We didn't have this ability in 1993 when I graduated high school. But for as connected as we are and all this ability we have, we're just disconnected from ourselves. And if we're disconnected from ourselves, we cannot be connected with each other. I love
That's right.
that. Well,
Yeah.
I end each podcast with telling the listeners to go out and be the person that they would want to meet. So, if you want to meet cool people, be cool. If you want to meet an asshole, then go out and be an asshole. I'm sure you'll find one, right? Well,
That's right.
thank you for your time today. That was a great conversation, right up my alley, and it's given me a lot to think about. And yeah, I almost felt hypnotized for a moment. I was so deep into what you were saying and kind of thinking about it and pondering it. But this is going to be great for me to think about while I'm Ubering, pondering this kind of stuff. Very enlightening, informative for me and the audience.
Thank you. I really appreciate the kind words, and I'm very happy to be here with you. Very happy you have this platform and that you're putting this information out there. Again, yeah, just like you said, with the connection, we can, scroll and disconnect from ourselves and from each other, or, ideally, I'm just so happy that we have the ability to share this information. So thanks for having this. Thanks for having me too.
Yes. Awesome, man. Well, have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Asteroid of fear.